Students, I'll be talking about study population and sampling. Just as a part of this disclaimer, I just would like to say that this is only intended for level 3 BSN students. Okay, if you are concerned in this presentation, it could be emailed on the email indicated on the slide. Now, these are the main references used for this lecture unless otherwise specified by yours truly. Now, you have your sampling and population. Your sampling and population is very important because it will answer the question to whom will you be conducting the research, who will be your study population, who is your sample size, how will you be determining your sample size. Okay, that's why we are learning sample and population. Now, let's have the term sample survey. When I say sample, just like when you use the word sample, it's like a mini. Okay, it's just like an example. When I say sample survey, it could be also referred to as survey. When I say sample, it means it is only a part of the population which is participative or representative of the characteristics of the population. Again, when I say sample, it is considered to be a part of the population which is representative of the characteristics of the population. I need to remember that. Now, when I say, for example, that my population is 1,000 student nurses in a private school of nursing in Iloilo, that's my population. Meaning, the study that I will be conducting is about these 1,000 students in the level 4 program. Okay, or in the entire BSN program. However, when I say sample, let's say, for example, out of the 1,000 students in the College of Nursing, I would only be taking, for example, 250 students that I will be using as my sample. In other words, I will be gathering data from 250 students. Okay, that's my sample. In other words, I don't need to take everybody. I don't need to consume all the 1,000 students. I don't need to get the data from all the 1,000 students. I just need my sample size of 250. Okay, that's just an example. Now, you might be asking, sir, how do we determine 250? Or how do we determine the number of sample size that we need to get for this research? There is a sampling formula that we are using in order to determine the sample size that is appropriate for our research. Okay, we'll be able to touch on the sampling formula later on. Now, the question in mind is, why are we embarking on survey? Why are we embarking on samples and not population studies? Okay, so class, survey is considered to be economical and practical compared to your census. Again, survey is considered to be economical and practical compared to your census. Now, when I talk about census, census is a population study. When I say it's a population study, meaning everybody will be included as respondents of the research. Everybody will be answering the questionnaire that I am using for this research. That's the census study. But when I say survey or sample survey, it's just a part of the population who is answering the questionnaire. That's why we see survey as an economical and practical compared to that of your census. Next, another advantage of your survey. It's considered to be faster and cheaper. Imagine, instead of conducting my study among 1,000 people, I would be able to conduct my study, for example, among 250 or 300 people. It's faster, it's cheaper. It would be able to give us a more comprehensive information. Why do you say more comprehensive information? Because you are able to gather a lot of data from few people. Okay? You're gathering a complete set of data from few people. It is also said to be more accurate. Okay, plus the accuracy of your survey could run from 90%, 95%, and even up to 99%. Okay, so it could play 90, 95, 99%, depending on the margin of error set by the researcher. And then it would allow for a larger, class, when I say here larger, you write there quote and quote, it allows for a larger coverage. Okay, it allows for a larger coverage because you would not just focus on one by one people in a certain barangay. Instead, you can explore different barangays who would have different respondents for that matter. And then, it would also be more variated. In other words, you will be able to gather the data, okay, from different kinds of people or different members of the population. So again, larger and variated. Next, sampling. Sampling is the process of selecting the individual from the total population to be studied. Okay, with my example earlier, if you have the population of 1,000 and then you will only be getting 250, how you will choose 250 from 1,000 is sampling. Okay, how you choose the members of the sample from 1,000, which is the population, is your sampling. So if you will be asked if what is sampling, it is the process of selecting the individuals from the total population to be studied. So you highlight process of selecting the individuals. This ensures that the sample is representative of the study population. Okay, again, the main goal of your sampling is representativeness. The main goal of your sampling is representativeness. For example, I had 1,000 student nurses in the School of Nursing when I will conduct my research. And then there are 250 of them. Okay, there are 250 from my sample size. My goal is that I would want to ensure that each of the year level would be participated for, or each of the year level would be adequately represented in my sampling methodology. So plus, my intent is that I want to make sure that level 1, 2, 3, and 4 are adequately represented. If I will not be using sampling strategy, there might be a possibility for me to take all 250 from third-year students only because I know to third-year students. So that would be biased. That would be unfair because I will not be able to gather information from level 1, level 2, and level 4. So it is your sampling strategy that will tell us what is the best way to select the representation or to ensure representativeness of the study population. Next, population. We have been using the terms population earlier. So what do we mean by population? This means all members or units or even elements of any well-defined set of group of people or objects, which is the focus of the investigation and from which a sample is drawn. Your key word here, class, is the word all members or units or elements. That's the definition of your population. Now, come to think of that. If your population, for example, dear students, will be talking about student nurses, or let's say my study is level of satisfaction among student nurses. My study population is student nurses. But if I will be talking about RLE skills, or let's say related learning experiences skills among level 2 students, then my study population is level 2 students. So do not think na, okay, I'm studying about student nurses. Maybe my study population will be the student nurses. No, it would depend on the context of your research. For example, I would want to study student nurses who are already parents. So my study population are student nurses who are already parents. It does not mean that it will be all the student nurses. Okay, so again, it would depend on your study. Now, stratum. When I say stratum, the plural of your stratum is strata. We oftentimes hear the word strata. So class, when I say stratum or strata, okay, I'm sorry. So when I say class stratum, your stratum is group. No? Okay, your strata is group. Okay, this refers to a certain group. It refers to a group or a specification or a division among a certain population. If you would look at the definition shown on the slide, it would say it is defined by one or more specification that divide a population into mutually exclusive components or parts. Example, if my study population class, if my study population would be student nurses, let's say for example, my study population is student nurses. The strata from which my population or the strata from which I will be talking about my student nurses is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Level 1 is one stratum, level 2 is another stratum, level 3 is another stratum, level 4 is another stratum. If I'm talking about a municipality, for example, the stratum could be each of the barangay in the municipality. If I'm talking about, for example, the level 2 student nurses, my stratum could be section A, section B, section C, section D. If I'm talking again about level 2 student nurses, I could also divide level 2 student nurses between male and females. These are stratum. In other words, what are the subgroups in your population that would be able to divide the population into mutually exclusive components? Now, what do we mean by mutually exclusive? Diba, if you are in a relationship and then you say that you're exclusive, means that you might be loyal to your partner, no? That's oftentimes how you use the term exclusive. So class, when I say mutually exclusive category or components or parts, it means like this, that the member of the population would belong only to one of these subgroups. Again, the member of the population would belong only to one subgroup. For example, if I will talk about student Cristel is belonging to level 3. Okay? I could not make a category that student Cristel would belong to level 1, level 2, and then she also belongs to level 3. Okay? That's a different story. That's not how it works. Na? So you should be able to have stratum or groups that divide the population into mutually exclusive components. And these mutually exclusive components, again, guys, would mean that they belong to a certain group, specific group, and not duplicated in other groups. That's mutually exclusive. Next, target population. When I say target population, it is the group or set of individuals, check or events which is subject or focus of investigation. Your keyword there is the word subject or focus of investigation. That's why you have target. Okay? That's why you have your word target population. Sila po yung subject or focus ng investigation. Next, homogeneous. Oftentimes, when we are describing population, when we are describing a certain population, we have a tendency to use the words homogeneous and heterogeneous. Okay, so when I say homogeneous, it means that the units or members have identical or similar characteristics. Okay, the keywords are identical and similar characteristics. For example, I will be able to say that the students in section J have homogeneous scores. It means, class, that if one student scores 70 on the major examination, other student may have scored 72, other student may have scored 71, other student may score 74, 75, 70, and 76. In other words, their scores are close to one another. Their performance is almost the same as one another. That's what we meant by homogeneous. Then, the next term that you will encounter is heterogeneous. So, dear students, when I say heterogeneous, okay, heterogeneous. When I say heterogeneous, it means different. Okay, the units or members have extremely diverse or different characteristics, meaning the characteristic would vary from one individual to another. Okay, if I would go back to my example earlier about scores, dear students, for example, one of the classmates scored 70, other classmates scored 90, another classmate scored 50. Although there are people who would score 72 and 74, there are people who also score 88, 86, and then there's somebody who scored 52. That way, class, we can say that the class is heterogeneous. Okay, so what are the applications of this? There are actually different interpretations that could be pulled from this, depending on the type of data that we are exploring. For example, if I'm talking about scores, no, I will have a tendency as a teacher to design different strategies if my class is heterogeneous. Because in other words, my class would have different characteristics, and then they would have different learning strategies that would not adapt to my teaching style. Meaning I need to explore varied or different teaching style in order to improve the performance of my students. Whereas if they are homogeneous, I can say that, okay, homogeneous strategies or the same strategy may work in this set of students. Okay, so that's how you would do homogeneous and heterogeneous. Now, if I'm talking about the measures of homogeneity and heterogeneity, we are talking about in statistics the measures of variability. We are talking about the measures of variability. Okay, so the word is variability. Okay, variability. Okay, so class, when I talk about variability, this means we are trying to measure how different is it from one another. How varied is the data from one another. That is what you refer to as variability. Okay? Now, in statistics, the common measures that we have, if you have heard of standard deviation, If you have heard of variance, these are the most common measures of variability. Next, sample. Bumabalik tayo kay sample. So when I say sample, as I have mentioned earlier, it is a subcomponent of the population. So sample, again, is a subgroup or subcomponent of the population. It represents the population on which it is based any statement about the population from which it is drawn. Okay, so it is representative of the population. That is, if you are able to employ correct sampling strategies. If you employed sampling strategies which are not congruent to your research design, you'll not be able to have a very good sampling interpretation. Okay, that's why you need to be careful with that. Next, census. Earlier, we've already talked about census. So in census, you count every unit or member of a given population. It is a determination of the distribution of their characteristics, the information obtained for each unit. So again, you count or study every unit or member of a given population. That's the purpose of your census. Next, you have the sampling design. Okay? So class sampling design, it is the scheme, strategy, or procedure of arriving at the sample, which involves the specification of the target population, the respondent population, and then the method of selecting the sample. So it would have three components. One, the specification of your target population. Two, the respondent population. And then three, the method of selecting the sample. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, the components of your sampling design. Next, margin of error. Margin of error refers to the limit of accuracy. In statistics, we commonly use three. We have 1%, then we have 5%, and then we have 10% margin of error. This is oftentimes represented by 0.01, 0.05, and then 0.1. Now, what's the meaning of margin of error? If my study would have 1% margin of error, it means that it's 99% accurate. Okay, if it has 1% margin of error, it means it is 99% accurate. If my study has 5% margin of error, it is 95% accurate. And if my study has 10% margin of error, it means that it is 90% accurate. Okay? Now, so what, sir, if it is accurate? Guys, if you're talking about pharmacologic studies or researches, we are actually dealing with 0.1 to 0.001. In other words, we would really want to reduce the margin of error to the minimum. If we're talking about social studies, let's say, for example, the survey that you are commonly embarking on, we could have a 5% margin of error. In other words, there is 95% accuracy. So what do we mean by 95% accuracy? In the words of other researchers, they would say, if I will conduct the study 100 times, I am sure that the result would be the same 95 times. If I will conduct again the study 100 times, I am sure that the result will be the same for 95 times. That is what we refer to by your margin of error. That's your margin of error. Next, probability. Probability. I hope you're familiar with probability, the number theorem in your statistics in the past. So class, when I say probability, it refers to the level of confidence the investigator has on the accuracy of his finding, which may be set at certain percentages. And this could be 5% of error would be equal to the probability of 95%. Okay, that's 95%. Okay, let's talk about your sample size. So sample size is basically the number of samples to represent the population under study. So it's the number of samples that would participate, the number of samples to represent the population under study, which should be adequate to warrant generalization of findings. So again, you will add that to your keyword. Sampling size or sampling is about representativeness and then generalization of the findings. For example, if my study population is 1,000, I could not just say that I can only afford 10 people, so let's have 10 respondents. No, we need to have a formula for us to determine the representativeness of our sampling. Because our goal is to be able to generalize these findings to our study population. Next, adequacy of sample. One criteria that we need to fulfill, or one criteria that we need to check when we are talking about your sampling, is the adequacy of sample. In other words, is the number of sample enough? Okay, that will be answered by the adequacy of the sample. So this includes quantity or number of required sample to represent the population. Again, adequacy is about quantity or number. And we are computing this using a sample size formula. Okay, there's a sample size formula. Now, representativeness. Okay, one word is adequacy, another criteria is representativeness. It means samples mix characteristics which are similar or identical to those of the population from which it was taken. Okay, so again, sample mix or characteristics which are identical, okay, which are identical to those of the population from which it was taken. Okay, let's say for example, you have level 1, level 2, 3, and 4. Okay, when I say representativeness, you should be able to get a sample from level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. That means representativeness. It's not possible again for you to get all of your samples in a specific level if your study population that you would want to study on is the entire student nurses. Okay? Hindi pwede na mag-focus lang tayo sa isang year level because that would not be representation. That is if you want to study about student nurses. Because some of you might say, oh sir, our study is only focused on level 3 students. So if your study is focused on level 3 students, make sure that you are able to get a sample from section A, section B, C, D, E, F, G. Because you would want to have representatives from all of the sections in your third year. That's what we meant by representativeness. To put more context to this, let's picture out that you are conducting a study on a certain barangay. And then this barangay has a component wherein there are mountainous provinces or mountainous part, and then there is a barangay, a component of the barangay across the river. If you are the researcher, you need to make sure that you're able to get samples from this part of the world, from this part of the world, across the river, and also in the mountains. Because if you will not be doing that, you might say, okay, the health status of the people are good in this area. However, you were not able to consider those who are living here in the mountains. So you need to make sure that there is representation in all of these areas, or else it defeats the purpose of your research. Or else your research will paint a picture that everything is okay, whereas it's not. Then, when we talk about representativeness, okay, you need to make sure that this is a miniature of the population. It's just like the population, only smaller. So, again, another example of that will be male and female, or even the LGBTQ. If you are conducting a research about HIV, you do not just say, I want to conduct the research among male having sex with male. Okay? Yeah, although you may want to focus on them, you need to be able to justify that properly. And why not conduct a research that would focus on male, female, lesbian, gay, all the members of the community? That way, you are not isolating some members of the community, and you are ensuring representation from the members of the community. Okay, that's what we meant by representativeness. Next, randomization. So when I say randomization, I do not say, okay, kakilala ko si participant A, participant B, C, and D. Let's get them as participants. Let's not choose E because E is suplada or suplado. No, that's not how it works in research. When I say randomization, it is the process of assigning the subjects randomly. Okay, so class, when I say randomly, it means by chance. It means by chance. Okay, if you are talking about quantitative, specifically experimental research, that would include randomly assigning these subjects, to control group or experimental group. Okay? In our case naman, randomization could be done in your quantitative research, which is survey type. Your randomization could be done by selecting randomly the participants of your research, and not just by choosing those people who are close to you. Okay, that's what we meant by randomization. Okay?
Thank you for your attention. There will be a second part for this discussion.